Hey guys, in this video, we're talking about why you should not build a business on car washing alone, because this is actually a question that I get often. So just to give you guys a little bit of context, one of the things that people ask and a lot of young guys wonder about is, when I'm starting my auto detailing business, can I start with doing something simple like car washing? Because I don't have any clientele yet, let me start with something simple and kind of build up. Number one, the idea that you need to start with something simple and build up is actually a very good idea, and when it's applied in the right context and in the right situation, for example with products, tools, and how much money you're investing in your business, it actually makes a lot of financial sense, and that is a very good thought to have. However, one of the questions is, rather than having to learn the whole detailing game in one fell swoop, let me just learn as I go and let me make some money washing cars at first. In my experience, this is a really, really terrible way not only to make money, because you're going to make very little money, but it's also a really great way to become very frustrated and aggravated and also disappoint a lot of customers. So I'm going to break this down kind of just point by point and explain why I've kind of come to this conclusion. Number one, car washing is something that is very difficult to communicate value within. What I mean by that is, pretty much across the board, by and large, when you're talking about washing a car with a customer who has no detailing experience and no real detailing knowledge, they do not understand in any way whatsoever what goes into washing a vehicle. Like you guys see how I'm using this kind of pre-foaming, pre-rinsing method before I even get to the agitation wash. They have no idea what goes into washing. It doesn't cross their mind. They think to themselves washing is something they could do, and in many ways, they're completely fine with bringing their vehicle through an automatic wash and being satisfied with that. They don't care about swirl marks. They don't care about long-term damage. They care if the car is shiny and clean right now. Because it's hard to communicate value when you're talking about car washing, because the truth is, while yes, we might add things like a pre-foaming or a pre-rinsing wash, and that is something that obviously adds some sort of value, washing alone is not really a huge value add position or area in the detailing world as it is. There's not a ton that goes into it other than making sure that we're kind of preparing for the rest of the detailing process. And for that reason, it becomes difficult to separate washing out from the rest and offer it alone or as like an isolated service and still make money, because people don't see the value and therefore don't see why you would charge anything more than what they would consider reasonable at any given time. It's very difficult to approach a customer that has, say, a big minivan or a 15-passenger van who wants it to be washed, and this actually happens very often, which is why the question is asked, because those who start in the detailing business who've developed a system to grab customers, you'll have customers often in the beginning call you and say, I just want a quick wash. I just want my car to be washed. And they even phrase it in a way that suggests that they don't think it's a big deal or very time consuming. You can even tell just in the tone they're using when they say, oh, I actually just want it to be washed real quick. It's actually a really fairly clean car in good condition. Shouldn't be a big deal. Just in the words and the language and the tone they're using, they're already with the expectation that this is actually a really simple job. So the second, in my experience, I can actually assign a number to this. The second you go above $35 for a car wash, people deeply question you and get very frustrated at you. They're almost offended by the proposition that you might charge more than that. And this is actually something that I think is fairly reasonable. There is a sense in the auto detailing world of some guys almost feeling like they resent their customer base because they say there's almost a tonality of they just don't understand the value I'm giving. And while I think probably part of that is rooted in something good, and we do need to understand the value that we're providing as auto detailers, at the same time, there needs to be a very realistic, grounded sense of kind of the conventional wisdom out there and how most normal average people think. It's not surprising that most people don't value a car wash, something that they grew up doing on a Saturday morning with Dawn dish soap, giving their son or daughter something to do, right? This is not like surprising, and it really shouldn't surprise us or hurt anybody's ego. But that's the first main reason why washing really is difficult to make money at. It ends up being something that is virtually impossible in a value add conversation. And I'm speaking from a fair amount of years of experience and talking to thousands and thousands of customers at this point. Now, the second main reason why I would not suggest building an auto detailing business off of car washing, or at least starting in that place, is because car washing is time consuming. It is time consuming, and it is meant to be an essential part of the detailing process, but it doesn't necessarily exist alone or isolated without the other parts of the detailing process. It's kind of like buying a washing machine, but not buying the little tube that you hook up to the water and then hook up to the machine itself. It's like you can run the machine, but the water's just going to spew out everywhere, all over the walls and the floor. It's not meant to exist without this portion. The car washing is not meant to exist apart from the full detailing process. And when you start to separate some of these things out, you end up making it really easy to disappoint the customer because their expectation is something that you're not offering. And I'm going to break that down more in just a second because I think it's the most important point. But washing is time consuming, especially if the vehicle is unusually dirty. And so this is an obvious problem. But again, what ends up happening is there is this point or this price of what I would call like diminishing return. It's like you can charge up for whatever reason. And in most areas and with most people I've talked to, this tends to be true. There's a price that people are willing to pay in a sort of maximum level when it comes to car washing. And past this price, it becomes very difficult to justify. And of course, like we just said, it's very difficult to have this sort of value add conversation with washing alone. So it's kind of a lose-lose for you and your customer. Because of that, and because of the nature of the time it takes to wash a vehicle, you're creating the biggest lose-lose for yourself I could probably even think of in the detailing world. Let's spend a lot of time doing something and get paid very little for it. And this is what I mean of the isolated, pulling things out that shouldn't exist in isolation. The reason I can charge, $200, $300, $400 sometimes well, of course, even more than that at different times, but just an average, probably around $350 is probably my average detail. The reason why I can charge that is because these areas that are sort of what you would call general cleaning or like the tip of the funnel, the general stuff like washing, lead into the detailing portion. They lead into the things that the customer can't do on their own. They don't have the experience. They don't have the tools. They don't have the product base. They don't have the knowledge base. But washing alone is something, once again, that just doesn't add a ton of value, right? The point of the detail is that I can actually do this and then add all of these other things on top of this. Iron X, clay bar, sealing things in, doing it with certain products that last for certain periods of time, and all those sort of things. And so I'm talking in circles around this point at this point, but it is important to just to understand the type of time that it's going to take to do this. And this is actually the number one complaint of guys who do wash cars instead of detail cars. Their whole thing is it's taking too much time and we're not able to raise our prices at any significant level to justify the time we are spending on doing this. Now, the last and probably most important point here is the expectation that the customer will inevitably have that you are literally unable to fulfill in any realm of possibility and unable to communicate or set the expectation properly. Let me break this down. A customer who calls you and says, and this is speaking from a lot of experience of this happening, a customer who calls you and says, I just want a quick wash. It's just going to be a quick cleanup. It's not a big deal. All I want is the wash. They almost every single time inevitably have this expectation that the car is going to come out looking really incredibly as if you waxed it, clay barred it, all of these other things, but they only want to pay the $35, $40 mark for you to wash it because, well, when he does that, it's going to look virtually the same. I don't understand why this phenomenon exists. I can only tell you that it exists, okay? It's like gravity. I can't point to gravity and tell you what it looks like. I can just show you the effects of it and by that show you that it exists. And that's what I mean by this. Maybe not every customer is this way, but almost every customer I've ever run into who calls and speaks with a sort of language or tone that says, I just want a quick wash, just a quick wash, just a quick wash. their expectation of how that vehicle is going to look based on what you are providing, there is such a chasm between their expectation and between what they're willing to pay for. It's irreconcilable. And the only thing you are going to do is lead them to disappointment and lead yourself to frustration. And this actually makes sense at some sort of logical, just deductive level, right? If all I'm doing is washing the car and all I'm getting paid is this $35, I am going to have to make an executive decision on where to stop. Right? You guys know if you've ever detailed vehicles, you could spend all day, even on a clean vehicle, detailing it to the highest level, because at every layer of the onion that gets peeled back in the detailing process, it just exposes more imperfections, more dirt, more things that need to be addressed. So at some level, as a detailer, you're the executive decision maker to say, I'm going to go this far and no further, because it's no longer justified by the amount of money I'm making versus the amount of time I'm spending, and it's also not going to make the customer any happier or unhappier because they're not seeing this area of the car. When I wash the car, one of the reasons why I keep saying that it shouldn't exist in isolation is because a wash is going to expose all of the other dirt, imperfections, all these embedded contaminants that will not come off with just a wash alone. This is why we wash before we clay bar, before we use any sort of iron removing product. That's why we do it as sort of a first go around of the detail of the exterior, because it's going to expose all the details that we're really getting paid to take care of. But this person is not paying us to take care of the details, so we're actually exposing all of these things that should be taken care of, and we're having to say, yep, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do this much and no more. Well, the customer doesn't understand this. And once again, the customer that calls you and uses the language of, I just want a quick wash, is not exactly the customer that wants to sit on the phone and hear about the ins and outs of how detailing works, what's going to happen, what kind of expectations should be set. This is just another reason why, in my experience, the car washing business that exists in isolation of, I'm just going to try to move a bunch of inventory. This is the kind of business idea behind the car washing business. It's kind of like a Walmart mentality versus like a really high-end shop mentality. You're wanting to go for volume rather than creating high-dollar jobs for yourself that aren't necessarily as difficult. You know, it's not the high-end brand. It's we're trying to move people in and out, in and out, in and out all day. And certainly there's a time for that. I don't think it works super well in the detailing industry. I don't think that model works very well, at least in my experience. However, that is the model, and the difficulty there is you want to get through customers as quick as possible so that you can move as much inventory, or in other words, get through as many cars as possible. That's where your margin exists, is moving 1,000 pieces of inventory instead of moving 5 pieces of really high-end inventory with really great margins. It's just a different way of thinking, and it's fine, and it certainly works in certain times. But in my experience, taking that approach in a virtually 100% service-based business where people's expectations are already a bit off and you're already having to deal with that, it just doesn't feel very wise, and in my experience, it hasn't worked very well for me either. And those are 3 main reasons why I think the car washing business doesn't make a lot of sense. And this last reason is a really long-term perspective here, but I do think it's something worth thinking about. A car washing business is not what I would call building a long-term asset that you could one day decide to do different things with. For example, like you could decide to sell it. People who you're building on a list, who you wash their car on a regular basis, this is not the type of person who you're trying to build a list around. The person that pays you $35 every 2 months for you to come wash their car, this isn't some person who deeply values their vehicle as an investment. They're probably not a person who, and this is probably an oversimplification, but you're not targeting or meeting people who are going to exponentially grow your business. And I'll try to put that like in a juxtapose that with this other idea that I think is much more effective. When you are targeting a certain type of clientele that are paying you $200, $300 a month or every 2 months to come service their vehicle, this is the type of client list that ends up becoming kind of compounds over time and becomes exponentially valuable over time. This is the type of person that other companies, other detailing businesses that are much bigger than yours, they want to acquire these lists of people who they can contact. It makes a lot more sense for this much larger detailing shop in your area to buy this list from you rather than run Facebook ads to people who they hope are targeted well. This makes a lot more sense. They're a lot warmer customers for them, and it ends up being something that's much, much more valuable. It's just hands down, there's no way of getting around it. So all of that being said, guys, those 4 reasons are really why I think this is not the wisest way to go about building this type of business, though people do it. And yes, I understand everyone, of course, has to have at least a starting place. And so I will say this just to kind of contradict myself for this entire video. If you can't do anything except for this, I do think it's better to do something rather than nothing. And so if you feel yourself stuck between a rock and a hard place in this business, certainly some sort of momentum is better than no momentum at all. Now, all of that being said, guys, if you're looking for good products and tools to use as you are washing vehicles, no matter what kind of business you're running, I'm going to hook up a very organized list below this video in the YouTube description box of my favorite car washing tools, products, and everything from towels to foam cannons to soaps to buckets, all of that. So check that out for products that are tried and true. And of course, if you are new to the Wilson Auto Detailing community, then go below this video, smash that subscribe button, and tap the bell icon so that you get notified when I publish future videos. Guys, thank you so much for being involved. And as always, from Luke here at Wilson Auto Detailing, keep working hard, and I will see you guys in the next video.